Okay, looking on then at measure 33, all kinds of tricks here. Okay, that first turn that we have below the G, we have a sharp sign there, so we're going to go from G up to A, back to G, down to F sharp, and then back to G. If you actually take that turn sign and just superimpose it over that G, starting on G with that first little bump on the turn sign there, superimpose it on the staff, G up to A, back to G, cross it over, down to F sharp, because of the chromatic alteration we have below the turn sign, and then on to G. Is how we come up with those particular notes. And most of these turns I'm starting them on the and of 2. Okay, the trick here in measure 34, this is really awkward. It's going to be that same figure we had back in measures 12 and 13. Let me move my stand over here a little bit. Same trick we had over there in measures 12 and 13. Now this one I'm going to start on side key C. I'm going to start on chromatic C. And instead of crossing the break to D, I'm going to go with side key C fingering. I'm going to hold that fingering down, and then I'm going to add my high E flat key by itself. So C, we're going to create a high D by adding just that E flat key, take that off and go back to the side key C, the chromatic C, down to B natural, and back to C. Once again in slow motion. You don't have to move any of those other fingerings to get that D to come out, but that high E flat key makes a sort of a passable D. Tone quality and pitch are slightly off, but it's preferable to going and getting all the clunks in there. Okay, through that passage I've pretty much used my chromatic C all the way through there too. It happens a lot. So the first C there in measure 35 was chromatic. The second C I went with a regular C fingering. End of measure 36, the B natural doesn't happen until partway through 37, but I'm going to go ahead and use a chromatic C fingering there anyhow. And likewise measure 38 and measure 39, both those C's I'm going to use that chromatic fingering. Okay, starting then at measure 41, this is just a repeat of what we did back here at measures 33 and 34, except that there's a misprint. You should have sharp signs underneath the turn signs of measure 41 and measure 42. That makes it virtually parallel to what we did and talked about at length back up here in measures 33 and 34. So let me do this for you here. Okay, so you see how that works. Now measure 43, we have chromatic F sharp in there. Okay, so our chromatic F sharp should be like playing F natural, and add the F sharp key here, and both those fingers will go down together, and we play that with our fourth finger, with our ring finger. That's the way the instrument was designed. Realize the strength of the human hand is always as the fingers move towards the thumb. So whenever possible we want to move the fingers towards that thumb, because that's where the strength is. There are a couple of exceptions to that on the saxophone, and playing low C is certainly one of those exceptions, and anything over here in the left stack would be an exception. And you all know how uncomfortable playing some of those notes can be. Well, we're working against the natural strength of the hand. So when we play chromatic F sharp, back to the point here, of the hand, play that F sharp there rather than and getting a note in between there like that. Okay, there's a little accelerando then in measure 45 through 46 and 47. Don't take that too much to heart too quickly. So barely begin it in measure 45 so you have some place to grow, and then take that all the way out, and the rallentando really doesn't begin, according to the copy here, until the middle of measure 48. So okay, that's one way of doing it. There are a lot of variations on that. It can be very much an individual thing. Okay, so I started the rallentando just a little bit before where it says here. I stretched that A just a little bit to show that I'm going to take this out of tempo now. And I held that fermata really quite a bit longer than what might be indicated by a dotted 16th note, but it's a very dramatic thing. Okay, now Waxman put the odd tempo in measure 49. I kind of like to take it odd tempo when I get to measure 51. And you can take a breath there if you need it. If you don't need it, just go right on. I would pretty much just play it on through myself. So I'm putting a little extra emphasis on what's called an appoggiatura. This is something we learned about in music theory, but it actually has a purpose playing music here. So measure 55, that G we have there, and measure 56, those are non-harmonic tones. So we bring out the dissonance a little bit from the non-harmonic tone. Something like that. So that does about all the special kinds of things. Primarily it's getting those turns worked in, getting the rhythm of the turn right, and remembering that any ornament, be it a turn, grace notes, anything like that, always add to the melody. They were always intended to complement the melody, not dominate the melody. So they should always be performed in a style that leads on to something, to a note that's more important. Fast notes always lead on to something that's more important. You can kind of keep that in mind too. So these are my impressions of the piece. These are the kind of the ways that I like to teach the piece. I think it's a very musical approach to it. Make sure your phrases are all nice and long. Make sure your phrases taper, and of course use as much vibrato as you are comfortable with. Since we're American players, our vibrato will tend to be a little bit slower than people who are more schooled in the French style of saxophone playing, where your vibrato has to be 300 dips per minute, and it doesn't matter what range you're in. American style vibrato pretty much is lower you go, the slower the vibrato becomes. As the notes go higher, the vibrato becomes slightly faster. This would be parallel to what a timpani player would be doing when they're rolling on a lower drum. They're going to roll slower. When they roll on a higher drum, they roll faster. You can kind of think about that from your high school band experiences. So, if you have questions about what I'm talking about here, feel free to email me. My email is gai@ucmo.edu. And I have written notes for this etude, and I'll post the link there on Facebook or on the YouTube page for you on how to find my written notes. So, Any problems, shoot me an email. Be glad to help. If you live in the Missouri, Kansas area and you want to come in for a lesson on what we're doing here and do it live and play back and forth, I'm more than willing to spend some time with you. Once again, just shoot me an email and give me some possible times for a get-together. So, hope you enjoyed the lesson and perhaps picked up a few things. Thanks.